Hi, my name is Corme, and today I'm taking you guys through a quick start guide for playing Augmentation Evoker inside of Mythic Plus. I'm going to start out by giving you a brief overview of the class before I get into stats, gear, trinkets, talents, and that kind of stuff for your loadout, and then after that I'll go a little bit deeper into gameplay and give you guys some examples of what your rotation is basically going to look like. But before I get into that, just so everything makes sense, I want to explain a tiny bit about the class because it is brand new. It's only been around for a couple months, and I'm assuming if you clicked on this, you haven't played the spec before. So the main idea behind this spec is that you are buffing your teammates. You are giving them main stat through a buff called Ebb and Might. This is the main source of your damage. There's also other smaller buffs like Prescience and Shifting Sands that you're going to be giving out, and I'm not going to get into those too much until later. You're also providing a lot of defensive utility with things like your scales that you're going to be keeping on the tank, and you're also just helping out by giving main stat to the tank and healer, and you have a lot of utility like knockups and knockbacks, really frequent knockups with upheaval, and things like that. So before I get into your kind of loadout, I want to talk a little bit about how Ebb and Might works. So Ebb and Might is a spell that you can cast every 30 seconds, and it puts a buff on your entire team inside of 5-man. So inside of Raid, it's only going to go on 5 people. Inside of Peace, it's going to go on everyone, including the tank and healer. Your main goal is to keep as much uptime on this buff as possible. Most people measure the success of an Augmentation Evoker by the uptime that they achieved during the dungeon. It's not that black and white, but just for the sake of beginning out, just think of it as being that black and white. So once you cast Ebb and Might, you can cast it every 30 seconds. The time it applies for depends on your mastery, because the mastery increases the time it applies for. You have 4 ways to extend the duration of Ebb and Might. You cast Ebb and Might. The first way is your Empower spell. So you have 2 Empower spells. One is Upheaval, and the other one is Fire Breath, which all Evoker specs have. The third is by casting Eruption. This costs Essence, which you have 6 Essence to start with. And the fourth way is by casting your 2-minute CD, which is Breath of Aeons. If you've played other Evoker specs, Breath of Aeons is going to replace your Deep Breath. That's all I'm going to start with for giving you guys like a basic idea of the class, and then I'm going to go into the talents and all that kind of stuff, and then circle back and give you a better idea later on. But that was just like the basic introduction I want to give you. Okay, so that brings me to talking about how you're going to set up your character, meaning the kind of stats and trinkets and things you want to go for. So number one I want to start with is a common thing to say that for Augmentation Evoker, most secondaries suck. And what I mean by that is your main stat is so much more important than your secondaries, because your Ebb and Might is just granting main stat to your entire team, and it's based off of your main stat. The best thing you can do is get as much main stat as you possibly can, and then after that, you worry about your secondaries. The absolute best secondary that you can get is going to be Mastery. So I said earlier that how long your Ebb and Might initially applies for is going to scale off of your Mastery. That's how their Mastery works. So Mastery is like the #1 thing you want to get. And then after that, the next thing you want to get is going to be Haste. The more Eruption casts you can get while you have an Ebb and Might up, the more you can extend it. So it makes sense that Haste would be the next best stat. The next best stat after that is going to be Critical Strike, because whenever you do the things that extend your Ebb and Might, if those things critically strike, it also kind of like crits the extension time it does for the Ebb and Might. The worst stat that you can get, and it's by a lot, is going to be Versatility. So Versatility doesn't interact with extending your Ebb and Might in any way. It only interacts with increasing your own damage and also giving you a DR. So if you look at like a dungeon, and you've seen this if you've watched like any streams with an Augmentation Evoker, they're always going to be really low on the damage meter, just barely beating the healer most of the time. So Versatility is only going to increase your own damage, so it's not going to be really good for you at all. The majority of the damage, when you look at logs, like Augmentation Evokers have no real trouble keeping up. Let's see if I have a log here. Yeah, I do. Okay, this is a log from a 29 halls, so you can see you are keeping up for the most part with other DPS while also providing a lot of like defensive utility for your entire group whenever you're playing the class. So, and most of your damage is just coming from Ebb and Might. That's why we care so much about increasing the duration of Ebb and Might. Shifting Sands comes from you casting your empowerment spells. These are your two, like, these are things of you actually doing damage. And Breath of Aeons, like a lot of that is contributed by other people inside of your party. So that is mostly what I mean when I say the versatility. As far as doing damage is going to be one of your worst stats. And also as an Evoker, you're not going to have, compared to other classes, you have a great kit for living most things that are going on. Okay, Outside of just your basic stats that you're going for, I'll talk a little bit about the gear. Your end goal is going to be, you of course want to have 4-piece, and your off piece is usually going to be the chest piece because the tier chest piece doesn't have great stats. However, you like if you get the BOE this tier that has heavy mastery, so if you can afford to get one of those, that's something you can easily get and it's a huge upgrade for you. The boots off Sarkarath are also a big deal because they have a lot of mastery, and then their secondary is going to be haste. Evoker Legendary is a huge deal because it's 457, it's buffing you, it's buffing your team, it's buffing your main stat, which is buffing your Ebonite. It just got a lot of synergy with everything. And then the offhand here. As far as your trinkets go, the best trinket you can get, the most important trinket that you get comes from Halls of Infusion. It is the Iridius Fragment. So it is a 3-minute cooldown, but whenever you use it, it gives you a bunch of intellect. Like I said, really, really important that you get intellect. I know, like, when you first look at trinkets, your first thought probably goes to using spoils. Because spoils is a 2-minute CD and it lines up with every single breath of Aeons. However, spoils is giving you a secondary stat. It's not giving you main stat. This trinket is giving you main stat, and also the main stat on the trinket itself is mastery, which is a fine secondary stat for you to have. And so even though you only get to use this every other breath of Aeons, because it's a 3-minute cooldown and breath of Aeons is close to a 2-minute cooldown, it is by far the best trinket you can get. As far as your second trinket goes, the best trinket you can get is going to be a Neltharian's Call to Chaos, if you can get the mythic one off of Echo. But if you can't get the mythic one, which I haven't been lucky enough to have it drop yet, even though I've killed it for months, the Chromatic Essence is also good, and you want to make sure that you're using Mastery with it. Now, as far as embellishments go, none of the embellishments are crazy, like, wow, I need to have this. So the only required one I would say that you need to get is a Spore Cloak. Just, it's a nice way to live. And like I said, most of the other like embellishments are like things towards like secondary stats and all that kind of stuff, which really aren't that impactful. The most common other embellishment that you're going to see is the one that I have here, which is the Adaptive Drakathis Arm Guards. They give you stats based on whether you do critical strike or you take damage. Another thing you can get is the Shadow Flame patch. I've also seen lots of top evokers not even running a second embellishment, which is kind of weird. Yeah. Most of my gear is just statted towards getting as much mastery. The only thing I really need to replace at this point is this belt that has avoidance on it, so I've been keeping it on anyways, because like I said, secondaries don't matter that much. Beyond that, that was talents. That was trinkets and stats. Now we're going to look a little bit at our talents, and I'll make my camera smaller because I just realized it's probably blocking it. Yes, it is. Okay, this is going to be your basic talent loadout. So as far as like over here goes, this never really changes except for one point. And that's going to be the Bestow Wearenstone can go into Inferno's Blessing. The Bestow Wearenstone, this is going to be utility, especially inside of a coordinated group. This is something I use in every dungeon, actually. Whereas Inferno's Blessing, if you're not in a coordinated group in a pug, you're pretty much always going to be running this and not going to be bothering with the Wearenstone. There is not a lot of wiggle room that goes on in this tree at all. Like as far as this main tree, it just goes between the point goes here in Bestow Wearenstone and Inferno's Blessing. The only other thing is that sometimes people will take Regenerative Chitin over here in Blistering Scales in order to do some extra pad damage. This is especially something people do inside of Brackenheim because it lets their tanks do like a lot of damage. It does do a lot of damage because there's just so many mobs and they attack so fast, especially like all the little Ashers. It's up for debate whether that's like important damage or not, but it definitely makes you look good on the meters and your tank might like it. I do often move my talent points over here. So something you'll notice is you can go for more damage. So for instance, like you don't have to take Time Spiral, you don't have to take Sleepwalk, and you don't have to take the reduction on these kinds of things. You can put those points into Instinctive Arcana, which if you put 2 points here is going to increase your magic damage by 4%. So again, it's the same thing as versatility. That's only increasing your direct damage, so it's not as big as a deal as you might think it is. You can also put points into Enkindled, which is going to do some more Living Flame damage for you. Living Flame doesn't do that much damage, but it's like a small gain for you. You can also put in Ancient Flame if you're burden embracing a lot. Things like that. Most of the time this week is Sanguine and Corporeal, so I'll always be keeping a point here, and I'll always be keeping a point here. And for me, I love playing with Time Spiral. It's really good, especially for things like pre-scripts, if you're running low on movement and just getting another hover and things like that. That kind of stuff is going to be way more impactful for me since I remember to use it and that's how I play than getting like 2% more damage here or something. So completely personal choice over here. Just make sure that you remember, like as an augmentation evoker, these little things aren't that impactful, but like the things where you can do like utility to like save time during a dungeon are often going to be a lot better. So yeah, like Inferno's Blessing is a little bit of damage, but if you're saving time and doing some like Ironstone skips and like that kind of stuff, it's always going to save more time. Like at the end of the day, you are a support class. You are not just some Zug DPS, and it's important that you keep that in mind. Okay, so segueing from that, I'm going to get a little bit into how this class plays the game. I'm going to be taking you guys through, I'll probably say you guys through the first pull inside of a 30 Neltharian's Lair that we did last week on Tyrannical, Bolstering, Afflicted, so not the best affixes, but they were good enough for us to do this. Before I get into it though, I do want to talk a little bit about the other spells that I didn't talk to you guys about yet. First is that you want to make sure that you do have your blistering scales on your tank at all times. You can recast this every 30 seconds. And for the most part, your tank is going to be going through the stacks fast enough, especially on a trash pool, that you are basically just casting it on them on CD. The other one is Prescience. So Prescience gives your DPS like a little bit of critical strike. It also has a chance to copy some of their damage, and also really importantly, it has a chance to give Essence Burst through some of the talents that it has. Somewhere over here, one of these, yeah, that one right there. So that's also like a nice button to press whenever you need to, if you're a little bit dry and you don't have anything to press, like with Upheaval. Remember that you can always bank on most likely getting a Essence Burst from Prescience, and also just keeping it on both of your DPS is going to give them a little bit of extra damage. It's not a lot of your overall. Just looking at it, we can look at my Prescience damage on this key right here. So it's only about 2%, and Fate Mirror also comes from that, so you can say it's about 5% damage from that. We'll look at it that way. It is a 10-second CD, and every single time you press it, it is going to last for 20 seconds. So you can keep 100% uptime on both of your DPS. Do your best to keep 100% uptime, but don't stress about it too much. It also is a like smart cast, meaning that if you just press a spell, it is just going to travel to your DPS players. Like it's going to prefer traveling to them. Like if everybody is in range, there's a DPS player that doesn't have it, you can just press it off your bars. You don't have to target them, and it's going to go on them. I wouldn't always recommend this though, because you do have short range, and sometimes I'll like see like, oh, my mage is in range, I'm going to press it, and as soon as I press it, he like blinks away, and since he blinked away, then it goes on my healer or something. It went on CD. Not like when that happens, it's not like the biggest deal. Like I said, it's not that much of your damage, but you do want to be trying to keep as much uptime on it as possible. The other thing I want to mention, and you can't see it on my frames right now, is that I do have Source of Magic on my healer. You can cast that pre-key, and you most keys are 40 minutes, so you never have to refresh it as long as you do it right before the key. So just make sure that your healer has it, and my weak word tells me if I don't have it on someone at the time. As far as this pool goes, so there's a large gather on this pool, and that's kind of why I chose this pool as an example. So what your first instinct might be is as soon as you get in combat to just press Ebb and Might and start extending it. However, on a pool like this, while the tank is gathering, he doesn't have great threat, and there's not a lot of reason to like stress about Ebb and Might and start using your resources to extend your Ebb and Might until like your other DPS also press their CDs. Like even more important than Ebb and Might uptime is making sure that you have it up at all the important moments, like when the CDs are happening and stuff like that, and also not worrying about things like threat. So while the tank is gathering, right now, none of us are hitting like any of the mobs. There's no reason for me to press it, so I'm just kind of like, my DPS didn't have feathers. I thought that was funny. We're kind of just following, and he's going to wait for the lurkers, and then he's going to pull the rest of it. And while that is happening, I'm basically just doing nothing except following. Maybe I'll hit a cauterize on my tank if he wants it right now, or maybe he wants to save it for later. I'm basically just worrying about these lurkers. And then now that it's all gathered up, my DPS is going to finish like dotting everything up. That means I can press Ebb and Might, and then as soon as I see him press PI, that is when I'm going to set my Breath of Aeons and my Fire Breath. So typically, like the basic like opener that you're going to do is going to be pressing Ebb and Might, Upheaval, and then you're going to Breath of Aeons, and then you're going to tip the scales a Fire Breath. So as you can see, I pressed Ebb and Might, I've pressed Upheaval. I'm waiting for him to press PI before I press the rest of my buttons, and I also want to make sure that I'm going to send Breath of Aeons during a safe time. Like there's a frontal from this guy, you just saw there's the swirly that's going on, and I want to make sure that I'm getting a good stun with the Breath of Aeons as well. So he has just pressed PI, I'm going to turn around and get a Dispel, and then after I get that Dispel, I can go ahead and set my stuff. So now I'm lining up my Breath of Aeons when I know it's safe for me to do. And I also am pressing Roar before that to increase the stun time on that. That's something else that you can get in the habit of doing if you want. And then after I've done that, then I'm going to tip the scales and I press my fire breath there. So now I have 4 leaping flame stacks ascend. So that's 4 more chances at getting an essence burst, which means more eruption cast. And all I'm doing right now is I'm just pressing eruption. I pressed essence there, I got an extra essence burst. I'm just keeping on both of my DPS. I'm pressing eruption. Really exciting stuff. I'm going to be out of essence now, so now I'm going to send my living flames. And these are going to give me some essence bursts. Yep, I get 2 essence bursts. Then I get to press more eruption, and then Ebon Might is back up. And I press that, and upheaval is back up. And this is your whole rotation. You are just pressing Ebon Might, and you're pressing your empower spells and your eruptions during that. The only thing that you're not going to see in this poll is whenever Ebon Might is down, you don't press your empower spells, and you do not press eruption. The only thing that you're going to press when your Ebon Might is not up is going to be Azure Strike and Living Flame, because those things don't cost anything. Those are just generators, meaning that those spells both have a chance to basically like give you an essence burst, which is going to help you inside of your Ebon Might window. Sometimes, like when you're at a fight, like a part of the fight where your damage doesn't matter, like for instance the totem boss that's going to be the second boss inside of this dungeon, you're just going to sit on Ebon Might and wait for the correct time to use it. And the last thing I want to touch on before I end this guide is how to use your defensives correctly for your group. So unlike most classes where your defensive is just your defensive, so for Prez and Dev evokers, this is just a regular defensive. However, for augmentation evokers, whenever you press Obsidian Scales, it actually increases the health of everyone in your party. So it's actually more like a group-wide defensive. Since you have 2 charges of this, and since you have CDR in it, it only has a 1.4 minute recharge and augmentation. This is a big part of what makes augmentation super, super broken. The combination of having a large group-wide defensive along with the passive that goes along with like Black Attunement, just increasing everybody's health and all the other stuff we've already talked about, is super, super good on certain boss fights that have things that are close to one-shotting or just providing an extra mechanic to allow everyone to live if the healer doesn't have a lot of stuff going on at the time. So it's really important that when you are pressing your offensive, you aren't just pressing it as like an oh shit button for yourself, but if you see like a mechanic going out that might kill someone else that like they're struggling to like catch up on healing for, it's dangerous for the group, it's dangerous for the tank, like especially like during polls where it's like there's nothing going on where I'm scared. Sometimes you just press scales for them and things like that are going to happen. And then even more than that, it becomes really important on fights like same dungeon. This is the first boss inside of Nelsolera. This is Rockmora. So whenever he does his Shatter Cast, it does a lot of damage and it's close to a one-shot. So the way that we set this up, especially on a Tyrannical, is the first shatter that goes off is going to be my scales. The next shatter that goes off is going to be my Zephyr. And the next one is going to be my scales. And the next one is going to be like Mass Barrier. And then I'll rescue shield. When you rescue, you give like a really large shield to like the squishy member of your group, which in this like the God Comms case is usually going to be the Shadow Priest. So I actually just have the Shadow Priest macroed into just like a basic thing. I also have like another priest that I often play with in here outside the one that's in this video, so that whenever I'm in a group, I have like a regular like rescue like thing where I can just like rescue anyone. I can't do that to them because they're in my group. But in addition to that, I just have bound to Shift F, which is an easy bind, like the person that I'm most commonly rescuing instead of a party. I find that's really helpful. Also, another thing that I have macroed is I have macroed into my eruption to go back to it was just a reset Black Attunement, which is what increases the health of everyone. So whenever you press like, let's just put Black Attunement on. So whenever you press hover, it automatically puts you in Bronze Attunement. And then whenever you press Scales, which is your defensive, it automatically puts you inside of Black Attunement, which increases everybody's health. So most of the time, you want to be inside the one that's increasing everybody's health, not really the movement speed one. The movement speed one has its place in dungeons like BP that have a lot of movement. So I find it's useful instead of having to like constantly switch back and forth between like the stances, is just to have it macroed into my eruption so that whenever we're like fighting mobs for the most part, I'm going to press eruption and it'll reactivate that. I go for a lot of ease, which is why I just also have like the trinket macroed into my breath instead of having different binds. You can min-max it more and you don't have to do this, and you can bind those things if you want to, but especially when you're just starting out, it's probably useful to just have macros like that. So I just want you to make sure that like if you're playing Evoker and I'm sending you out into the world to play it, that you're using your defensives, I don't want to say liberally, because you want to make sure you have them to live things yourself, but that is a huge part of what you're bringing to the table. So please make sure that you are using that utility, pressing your wall, pressing your Zephyr, and saving people as much as you can. That's what's going to get you invited to groups and help you climb more than anything on the spec, is the amount of utility and survival and things like that you bring to the group. And that basically wraps up everything I have to say for this guide. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to be making smaller little tips and tricks guides for each dungeons, not like full like walkthroughs like I used to do for preservation, but more just like little spots in dungeons where you can do cool things with like Stone and all that, and rescue and all that kind of stuff as an augmentation evoker this season. Thank you so much for watching, and good luck.